Well, here we are. Thank you for staying with us as far as the big stories are concerned. This is the AM show, and we bring you germane content. That's what we stand for. Now, this morning, as we hit our big stories, we're going to be jaw-jawing on the economy of Ghana as it is right now. We're facing challenges, it is clear. Our cedi, the worst performing currency on the African continent, fuel prices, diesel as of yesterday, hitting 11 cedis, 11 pesos per litre. Unprecedented. Our cedi has lost value of about 17% in recent weeks. And there is no end in sight in terms of how exactly we're going to deal with these problems. In addition to all of that, add what is happening across the world when it comes to COVID-19. Add on what is happening between Ukraine and Russia. And it is a very, very convoluted mess we find ourselves in. But to every problem, there is a solution or solutions. So how do we get to these solutions? Today, we are going to be interacting with someone who has been there and done that, been in the very thick of things, managing the affairs of our economy, steering us for quite a number of years. He is former finance minister, Minister of Economic Planning as well. Seth Terkper is our guest. Thank you so much. It's been a while. It's been a couple of months now. Thank you so much for making the time to join us this morning, Honorable Seth Terkper.
Good morning to you and good morning to your viewers and to your listeners. And I hope you can hear me clearly.
I can hear you loud and clear. And again, let me just say a big thank you because where you are, it's very early in the morning, but you've made the time to join us on the show. We are immensely grateful. Let's hit the ground running.
It's my pleasure.
I've already laid the basics of what is happening to our economy. The cedi is not faring properly. Escalating Brent prices across the world have given us a hydra-headed problem to deal with. But when you look at the economy as it is currently, what do you see? It's said that someone who is playing a game does not see certain things, but the one standing behind sees better. What do you see in terms of our economy as it stands now?
Yeah, thank you very much. The situation in which we find ourselves is a bit unfortunate, not because we have not been here before, but the situation is getting, dire. But in the introduction, we're focusing on the current. And you talk about the person, getting the path, may not get it straight. You will agree with me that there has been a number of warnings in the past regarding the way in which, the economy, was being, handled. We would always have issues, but the candidness. And let me give you one specific example, then I can come to the current. I think most recently we were told, by no less a person than the World Bank country director, and others, that the situation before COVID was dire. I think that some of us have said that we should not blame all our problems on COVID so that we can confront it, well. If you go to the 2019 Article 4, as we have pointed out, there was a fiscal gap of 3 to 5% that was disclosed. At the time, we were being told the economy was, doing well.
Right.
And this is quite apart from the fact that, expenditures and arrears, like the bailout costs and others, were being excluded in the calculation of, the deficit. Deficit is the revenue coming in, tax revenue, non-tax revenue, grants, less, your expenditure, which obviously goes into negative, and which is what leads you to borrow, and then you increase your debt. We were also being told how, structures like the sinking fund and others that were put in place, were not being applied very well. And so I think that there have been sufficient warning from academia and from various practitioners. But we are where we are. And where we are getting now is quite familiar. We are getting to the situation.
You say it's familiar because you've been there before?
It's because the country
finance
has been
minister?
there. No, it's because the country has been there. Recall that the last time there were petrol queues in this country was 2015 going to 2016. Measures were taken to stop them, like the strategic stock, which we put in place. Now, let me take fuel. For example, you give a background, and I think it's quite, succinct in that apart from our own problems, the CD, depreciating because traditionally around this time, the CD comes under pressure. But it is getting worse also because usually when we do the sovereign bond, the element that goes into the budget helps also to support the foreign exchange that is coming in to meet government expenditures and to provide some buffer for Bank of Ghana. So remember that last year we were to go to the market for 5 billion. We managed 3 billion and could not go to the market for the additional 2 billion. As we speak, we are getting to the end of March, and this is a period when government would have been on the roadshow, for the borrowing. I spoke about borrowing. The sovereign bond is an element of the borrowing that is used to finance, the budget. I don't think a program has been announced yet. We all know that the external market is virtually blocked to Ghana now. We couldn't go. The ratings are so bad. If we go, we may get something worse than the zero coupon bond. And we can explain the zero coupon bond. It's a very expensive bond that we did. By the time, again, for lack of candidness, we were told that it was a very bold initiative. We were told it had never happened in Africa. We were saying, you are giving away too much, for what Ghana is receiving. And Ghana is supposed to be paying, as we speak, 2025. Ghana is supposed to be paying the face value of that bond, which is about 550 million US dollars. But all that we got in cash for it was 350 million. So you can see the amount of money that we had to, give, to even get that money. But the excitement, overshadowed all of. Now we cannot even go to the market for that. And so because cocoa revenues, have gone down, since October, when they flew in, when I said flew, I'm sorry, when we received, it's virtually flown in. And then going into the heavy Christmas season and then the expectation for profits, the narrative. The support that should have been coming. Bank of Ghana did its best by trying to spread, the money. Now, there could be some money coming in now that, crude oil prices are going high, but the same amount has to go to support the importation of the crude oil. Otherwise, we would face a situation where we don't even have the supply. So if government is able to bring it in, the question we are facing is, where is the money, to pay the subsidy? I'm trying to lay the background, because once prices have gone beyond where it's manageable, government comes in, with a subsidy. And recall again, that since last year or 2 years ago, we started seeing a situation where, first of all, it was our tax revenue. The whole of our tax revenue was paying only two items: compensation and then interest. You remember that? Now, by the time we got into this year, it was the total revenue that was paying compensation and interest. And that means that if you take the 5 key items that constitute the budget, we don't even have money to pay for 2 of them, let alone, usually we pay for 3, which is the remainder of compensation of interest, which is called the recurrent expenditure. That is what is used to run government, to pay school feeding, to pay boarding, to pay, hospitals and the rest. That's and government offices. That's a recurrent expenditure. The balance is not enough to pay that, and then you would then go to, your capital expenditure for development. Usually, you are excused, for borrowing to pay for capital because capital is usually heavy. But now we have to pay for it. But 2 disturbing trends is that we are unable to raise our own money to pay for arrears, government arrears of from wages to, to anything. suppliers and contractors, who have done work for government and were not paid at the end of the year. And the arrears itself has been understated. That is what the World Bank country director, was saying, and it has been understated over the years. But the most crucial is that we are borrowing instead of relying on that revenue to pay for the principal. Remember, when we say it is paying for interest and compensation, the principal element is not, it means that it's not being covered. And so our inability to go to the market itself, and some of that repayment has to be in forex. So whatever money that is coming in by way of foreign exchange now is being used to service that in order that we should not default. So this is where the budget is so tight that these sums that, these expenditures which I have narrated, which most of which should be covered apart from, say, capital, including the coverage of repayment of principal, is not happening. So the naked truth is that government lacks the resources now to provide a subsidy. Now, when we started ESLA had various components. One component of ESLA was to pay off the arrears that was owed to BDCs, oil marketing companies, and the rest, the subsidy. There was some arrears. Now, we started paying them, before leaving office in 2016. But we also started an initiative where part of that money was being used to buy crude oil when the prices were low, and then store them in the BOS, the bulk oil storage and tank company. That's the essence of that company. But we had been paying lip service to it. So we started buying crude oil to put into, the tanks, so that when the prices started going up, then we started releasing.
Exactly.
So since you bought low, you don't have to release at a full market price, because you had already paid for them. Now the US, you could have heard US saying that because of the Ukrainian war and the rest, they are going to release strategic stocks. You could also have heard, China and others, South Africa. In Africa, Nigeria, oil producer, South Africa and others, they do that. So we also started. Unfortunately, that policy was also stopped, and we know what happened to the ESLA, which is why we owe so much on the energy sector. So I've tried to give a background to show that, this is not new at all. This is something that, had been coming, waiting to happen to the economy.
So it was waiting to happen, which means that we saw it coming, but we sort of waited for it to happen. And no one wants to do that, because the things we didn't anticipate, COVID-19 hit us, that pandemic. We've also had this scourge of war between Russia and Ukraine. But I want to ask a few pointed questions.
But before we go there, sorry, I'm sorry to cut it quickly. Before we go there, you see, you cannot come into office for 4 years and not expect to have crisis.
There will be a crisis at some point.
There will definitely be a crisis. And so what was the solution? Remember that when COVID hit, the first funds that we applied to COVID was not the IMF loan. The first funds that we applied to COVID was when the minister went to Parliament and asked, that the stabilization fund should be reduced and put into the budget. That was the purpose of the Petroleum Revenue Management Act, right? The first time we took money from it, it was, about 11 million US dollars equivalent in 2015 when crude oil prices fell, against the background of single spine, against the background of, and there have been wars. And that's why countries see that there was a global financial crisis. There was a fall in crude oil prices. And so that is why, in the thinking of the framers of the Petroleum Revenue Management Act, that fund was put in place. We got 2 additional oil fields from 2017, and we never increased that fund, right? It's a counter-cyclical fund, which you build up, when you have problems. And then when you have crisis, you reduce it. As we speak, about 370 million US dollars have been withdrawn in support of COVID. As we speak, the World Bank gave us $1 billion in support, US dollars, in support of COVID, all of which went into the budget. We got a special waiver. As we speak, we got SDR, $1 billion US dollars. The World Bank revealed recently that about $600 million US dollars was given to us. So if you add our own money, what is it about COVID? That
so the point is clear.
In the history, right. Let me just learn. For the first time in the history of this country, and we have gone through bushfires, we have gone through droughts, remember, yes, and all those situations. For the first time, we had a government that received $5 billion US dollars, which is more than 2/3 of what GRA brings in annually for one crisis. So this is the point some of us were making from earlier on, that look, the crisis facing us is an expenditure one. It's an expenditure one. We are not talking about expenditure. I think we should. You remember, former President Mahama said, let us have a national forum, if you remember, on free SHS and other government initiatives, because they are expensive. First of all, we threw oil money at it. We wanted to sweep the Heritage Fund, if you remember, 3 years ago, to support that expenditure. And then there was opposition, including some of us, that the framers of the Constitution, just as we spoke about the Stabilization Fund, had a purpose for the Heritage Fund. You cannot be throwing debt at future generations and then not give them the revenue to meet those expenditures. Right. Then we remember PIAC and others had to come in when too much of oil revenue was going to support education, because there was no balance in the four sectors. Remember the capping that was done, from all IGFs and other statutory funds in support of government expenditure. When all this was not enough, we started borrowing to support free SHS and other government initiatives. We are not talking about expenditure. We must talk about expenditure. We must cut our coats according to,
and Seth, I would have us go there shortly. This bit about expenditure. It's something that I'll have us go into, even as the sitting administration has its economic management team, cabinet, sit down and talk about the way forward. I would let us go into that and the sort of things we can do to actually downscale, because are we too top heavy, for example? We'll get into those. But owing to time constraints, I want us to cut into certain matters very concisely, because there are quite a number of them that we have tabled ready for you.
We can run through them.
My first bit, you've spoken about candidness, which has been lacked by this administration. Do you feel this government has lied itself and all of us into this economic distress? And I premise it on the fact that we've been told by the World Bank and its country representative, Pierre Laporte, that even before COVID, our economy was ailing, that we had problems. It's been suggested by the same outfit that our debt to GDP is above 80%. Your very own Kasilato Forsen in Parliament has suggested that by end of year, we would be hitting 90% debt to GDP ratio. So the question, has this administration lied itself and by extension all of us Ghanaians into economic distress, into the crisis we're facing now?
Well, you know that I try as much as possible to refrain from hard language.
Yes, but I want you to be blunt. I mean, call us Peter.
Excuse me, let me rationalize it. Then that becomes, the headline. That becomes the story instead of focusing on the issues. I already said that there must be candidness. I already said that and gave examples.
So there was no candidness.
Yes, there has been some being economical with the truth, if you like, as it's normally said when you want to be modest about some of these things. So yes, that some accounting methods were not the best, putting bailout costs, in footnotes and then claiming that the subsidy was low, excluding it from debt and claiming that your debt. And we did not pick the hint when the IMF started to adjust in 2019 and told us that our deficit was above 7%, and not 3.7, 4.5, or even the 5.8 that we're talking about. So yes, There has been some economy with the truth.
Okay. Now let's look at how that lack of candidness has affected us. We're looking at the cedi, for example, and if you look at its level of depreciation within a certain period, 17% against the dollar, for example, it's slumping against all the major currencies. There is also a bit of a pushback. When you look at today's daily graphic, page 13, for example, the finance minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, says we need to go into emergency mode to reform the global financial architecture. He talks about it from the standpoint of the credit rating agencies, the Fitches, the Standard & Poor's, the Moody's, and the rest. But in there also, I want to add our over-dollarization or our over-reliance on the greenback, the American greenback. That is a fundamental problem, is it not? And how do we manage our cedi to prevent some of these slumps if we don't manage the dollarization of our economy? Under your tenure, there were some moves to, ensure that the Ghana cedi is used for most transactions, that items, for example, houses and all of that are not purchased in dollars, but it did not work. And we find ourselves here. How much is the reality or the biting truth when it comes to our economy, the global architecture, and our over-reliance on the American dollar?
The whole world depends on the American dollar. As we speak, Russia, mighty Russia, may default on account of the financial sanctions that has been put.
But just to interject, they will not default because they don't have the money, but of what they've called artificial, an artificial manipulation, because then they will not be able to raise the sort of sums from the banks that have been affected. So it's not that they don't have the money, but
yes, but the point you are making is about the importance of the dollar. And so the Russian economy is a strong one, right? And why is it that, as it's been suggested, that fear is still there, even though they have said that they could settle their, commitments in rubles, right? And that is precisely because of the strength of the dollar. So I'm only giving you a comparison that stronger economies also bow to the dollar. Even oil-producing economies bow to the dollar. And that is on account of a country managing its wealth. Its finances well, right? Such that, they are able to capture the growth and make the dollar the currency of choice. So I'm afraid those arguments, two reasons. First of all, we are in a crisis. Yes, that is very important. But that is a long-term solution. We have been, since 1970s, attempting to get a West African currency the ECO. We have not been able. Let's face reality. I think we should be talking candidness now. We have not been able to meet the criteria the West African economies put together to come in with the eco we could support, the cities. So we have the dollar and we know it, and that you have to face it. And that is why you must take measures, to manage your expenditure so that you can support the dollar component of it. Yes, we can have that discussion. But the point I'm making now is that discussion, which has been thrown into the debate now, will not help us get out of the crisis. Because, rather like Russia, we cannot use the cedi to settle, some of those expenditures. So how do we get the dollar? That is the question facing it. Secondly, remember that this government in particular criticize other governments when they had one oil field, when we had Tarek bearing, and when we had Single Spine taking so much, when indeed we had a situation with gas supply. We coined one word, and they were keen on it, doing so to describe that situation, and not excusing the government. Did not excuse the government, did not give room. Everything was said to be. What has changed? They had 2-3 oil fields, as I said. So it isn't as if they did not have revenue. They had 200 million US dollars balance to pay off the coupon bond. As we speak, I doubt if there will be anything to meet the zero coupon bond in 2025. That's the sort of performance. They had ESLA, which should have cleared, the arrears. You can Google for yourself. In January 2017, it was admitted that there was enough money to pay for the energy sector debt, contractors and the rest from ESLA. What happened? That money was turned into, the flows were turned into a bond, the money received in advance. We did not make those expenditures. And again, we come back, we can repeat it. The World Bank is telling us that our situation, and I wish the World Bank itself had told us this. But there is this clarification coming, because remember the World Bank president, when we wanted debt forgiveness, said, come for debt suspension. You're a middle income country, and we didn't get it during COVID, after the 5 billion. So I'm saying that we have current situations. That is one. How are we going to pay wages? Negotiations, have merely been suspended for teachers to, the UTAG and the rest to go back.
Right.
There will be negotiations. How are we going to pay our arrears? The country has come to this situation, and the country usually presents its own position, like, we did with the homegrown policy. Right. If you don't want to go to the IMF, right, and we can introduce that topic, where is the alternative? We wanted to present a homegrown policy, but what happened was we had to be pragmatic about the situation when the World Bank, the EU and others, withheld budget support and said that we do not have much confidence, in the program that you have put in place. You remember the policy credibility issue.
Right.
So the question is, for the minister is, where is the alternative? If we say we are not going to the IMF, that is what we are talking about.
And those are the alternatives that they're going to be debating, whether to go the way of the IMF, whether to do the E-Levy, or whether to do a combination of the two, or maybe even introduce something else that we've not brought into the fray yet, as far as this discussion is concerned. But I want to pin you down on that point again. So is it to say the CD is hopeless against the dollar? China has its own way of dealing with the dollar. In fact, sometimes they devalue their own currency for their own benefit, for the benefit of the economy. Russia, yes, we talk about the fact that they can't make international payments in rubles and all of that, but at least they have the equivalents to make the payments. In our case...
No, but remember, if I may interject quickly,
right,
remember that when the sanctions started, the first thing that the Russian Central Bank did was to allow interest rates to go up.
Right.
In response, quickly.
Right.
Yes, so you are right. These measures, when the crisis comes, all countries, the mighty US we are talking about, to protect that dollar, right? As of yesterday, was raising interest rates for the first time,
right,
in many years.
True.
Yes. So where is our measures? You are not telling us about the measures that even, economies that are very strong. The UK started adjusting interest rates a while ago because of the COVID recovery, which you mentioned in your introduction, which was going to bring pressure. Now, when these strong economies start adjusting, and as you said, that is going to pose additional pressure. Okay. So the question is, you see, we are flagging this point. Should we go to the IMF or not? The government has said we are not going to the IMF. But we've heard Gabi, he's not government rep, but we've heard him saying that everything is now on the table. If reality is setting in, yes, then we can consider that a hybrid. That hybrid was something we attempted. The instrument that is used with Kenya and others is called the policy support, instrument, where you come out with your own policy. Right. You ask the fund because they are giving you the credibility to go to the market. That is it. The word that, remember, they criticize us so much that we want to the fund policy credibility. The Fitch is not going to believe anything you are telling them now. That's why they are downgrading you. So you need that credibility support, that credible support, to go to the market. So government has ruled out going. What is the alternative?
What is the alternative?
Measures? Bank of Ghana has been implementing some of them. You can see that, interest rates, and others, and then the inflation is now showing. The reason for the inflation is the crude oil prices and the rest. So Statistical Service, Bank of Ghana and others, where is the policy from the Ministry of Finance, the alternative? I think that is what we should be posting to the minister.
And I think the alternative is what we are all, interested in. But I want a very, very quick...
Well, hopefully the cabinet meetings and things going now will come up with that bold alternative.
Hopefully. Yes. But I want your quick reaction. You've mentioned the ratings agencies about twice now. Do you agree with Ken Ofori-Atta when he says we need to go into emergency mode to reform the global financial architecture, specifically referring to the credit rating agencies and how we are beholden, so to speak, to them? Mind you, they don't come to us or foist this on us. We go and pay big money to get them rate us, because based on the back of the same ratings, we're able to go on the global market and get loans and all of that. He's saying we should change the architecture. What could he possibly mean? I mean, do you agree with him?
We can explain that. But let me repeat again. It is immaterial to where Ghana is today. You cannot change that overnight. China, cannot change it overnight. Do you know that when we go to CDB to borrow, CDB itself, the China Development Bank, which has been financing China exit, do you know that like our bond, which is rated, do you know they go to the capital markets, the same capital markets to borrow? And that's why they're able to give us a blend at a very low rate. As Cocoa Board, is a good example if you discipline yourself, right? So I'm saying that that issue was raised by His Excellency the President already in Addis Ababa, if you remember, when there was the AU. Yes.
Right. That they are being unfair to us and all of that.
Exactly. You need other countries. But let's be cautious. If Africa has its ratings agency, where is the depth of the African market compared to London Stock Exchange, compared to
the
New York
FTSE
Stock
index,
Exchange, compared to Shanghai and the rest? It will take time to build that. And I'm saying that debate, I'm not saying it's not relevant, overall, but it's a long-term debate for the entire continent, for ECOWAS, to come out with the echo. The question we are asking now, of the government is, where is the alternative if you are not going to the IMF? It's a simple question.
Right yes. Before we get into that, and that might not be so simple, because if it were that simple, I mean, I'm sure they would have answered it by now. It's convoluted and it's tricky. But have we waited too long, for far too long, to make this economic call for a dialogue? And even then, it's not bipartisan like former President Mahama and others have called for. I've hosted Roxanne Nelson, Dafemekbo, and others here who have said that.
Remember some stalwarts
invite us.
Some stalwarts within the MPP, Mr. PNM and others have been pointing to the need for us, to come to grips. But
as of now, the stance is we're going to pick the brains, finance and economic brains within our party. And a la the Senchi consensus, we're going to Peduase to brainstorm and see whether we can find solutions for the country. So first of all, have we waited too long? Have we waited too long?
No, there's a difference. There's a quick one. There's a difference. At Senchi, it was not government alone. Senchi was after
I'm not intimating that. I'm saying that in reminiscent of that, though, I mean, the likes of Mr. Pianim and others, were there. Others, I hear, attempted to be there, but were told not to, appear. But
President Mahama has said that we will be there if we are invited.
Right.
To show his sincerity when he invited the then opposition, and they refused to come. He has said that.
Have we waited too long? Has this administration waited too long to come up with this?
Absolutely. If you are being told by no less a personality, like the World Bank country director, and the bosses in Washington, right, putting a bit of diplomacy aside, but saying it in as diplomatic a manner as possible, that before COVID, you had the situation. And let me mention what they are saying. They mention only one item. They're saying that we had arrears, which was tantamount to 5% of GDP. Remember, some of us said the 2020 deficit should be 15-16%. Government adamantly said it was 11%. For the same reason, because the gap was disclosed in 2019 and there was no solution to it. So if you add that, they are 5%. To the government's 11%, you add the 16%, which we're talking about. So if the deficit in 2020 was 16%, and remember, instead of the arrears going up. The arrears for 2021 was lower, much lower than 2020. And then for 2022, you can check. Now that we are talking about these things, please ask your producers to go and check the figures and the budget. Even we are saying that, from 3 billion, the arrears is just 1.9 billion, not dollars, but Ghana cedis.
Right.
We are told. So one of the corrections that has to be made in terms of candidness is what is the true arrears, which must be added to the deficit if we have to do an adjustment.
Add to that, how problematic is it that this is not bipartisan or even multi-partisan? It is the same group of people saying we're going to think about the same solutions. The same group of people that has not been able to find solutions yet. That is not to denigrate what they're going to do, but how problematic is that?
Well, I reckon that the situation might change. Remember, we are still waiting for SONA. We're still waiting, and we are in March. And in 2015, March, when we did the 2016 budget, 2016 March, when we did the budget for, 2015, when we did the budget, at the time we were doing the 2015 budget in November, crude oil prices fell from $99, and down, to below $30 and then crept to 35, and it never recovered until 2017. We went to Parliament around the same time to make a statement, and to trim down expenditure. You said we'll talk about expenditure. We trimmed down expenditure. If you remember, in order that I might not be seen to be pontificating, let me tell you that we were going into the 2016 elections when President Mahama announced that we were not going, to complete all the 200 e-schools. And he said it was on account of non-performance. No, it was the realism of the external economy hitting us. He did say that we would target 120, but finish completely 50, right? And then should we have won, then we would. Remember, back then we were talking about free SHS, the progressively fee-free, education, high school, education, right? So we're saying that the precedent is there. And so the answer, I brought this point to show that, and those came after a similar cabinet meeting to see the situation.
Right. So
now that we are seeing the effect, I envisage that, there would be two things coming out of this. Either we are going to seek for help. Remember when we talk about going to the IMF, it's not just the IMF, because when you go to the IMF, we just said it, you are sending a signal, that you have a policy to Fitch, it's not just Fitch also, it is the equity funds. You are in the global market who gave you money, whose debt you must now service. And they are saying that your policy is not credible enough. That expression is in the Fitch statement. In fact, that expression, right, is in the MPC report for May 2021. Go and read it. When the 1 billion 2020, when 1.7 billion US dollars equivalent was being given by the central bank in support of the government, and then subsequently, if you read some speeches by the MPC and by the governor, they've always pointed to the fiscal challenge that we are facing. So it's not just Fitch. When we want, I mentioned the World Bank president and the rest. So I envisage that there would be either a comprehensive plan to tell the nation that we are not going to the IMF, this is our plan, similar to the homegrown. Let's see whether it will be credible. Otherwise, we may come and say, well, this is the realism. We exited the IMF. We went to the same IMF for their 1 billion loan. We went to the IMF for their 1 billion SDR. It is time to go to the IMF again. You see, the test of not going to the IMF is known when you come into funds and you have sufficient money. Right. Including ESLA, including...
It's precisely when you don't have it.
It is when you have your crisis.
Right. Let me just find out from you. And you have been in crisis situations before, so you are pretty much an expert in this arena.
Every minister has been in crisis situations.
Right. And I concede that. If you were Ken Oforiatta, Would you support this E-Levy, as people have called it, double taxation? You've spoken about the IMF and what it would take. We can't go with bare hands. We would need policy to show how we are trimming down. For example, it's been said that we have a top-heavy executive or a top-heavy, arms of government in terms of spending. But would you have supported the E-Levy or some mix of the E-Levy?
I have a position on that. And the situation has not changed. And so, no, I don't think I can support it in its current form. And let me give you my two main reasons.
Which form would have been okay for you?
That's what I'm explaining. First of all, one, it is taxing savings. And we have never taxed savings, even in our direst of situations. We have three efforts. We should tackle other expenditure first. And then, but the fundamental opposition to it is that it is distorting the tax regime and it is taxing savings.
Right.
It is saying that after you receive your wages, you sitting down there right now, and multimedia has deducted the PAYE and paid it to the government.
Right.
The money that's in your pocket by merely transferring it, not because you are using it for expenditure, which must be taxed, not because you are using it to earn income through trading or owning a taxi or whatever, which must be taxed, but by merely taking what you have saved, a tax is being imposed on it. Secondly, we have had temporary taxes and levies, and I'm not going to deny it, ESLA and the rest, right? They were supposed to be temporary. This government did not, even when they had 3 oil fields, right? They did not make, they did not allow the temporary taxes that we imposed when crude oil prices fell and others. They did not suspend, they did not remove them. And let me give you enumerate them. First of all, there was ESLA, which was to last 3 to 5 years.
Right.
Now it has been extended through the ESLA bond to beyond, 10 years. There was a temporary import duty, which we started reducing. It was never removed. There was a fiscal stabilization levy. Remember, it has been increased through what you call the, another levy, NHIL levy. There were so many other levies. And these are becoming permanent. We are not being told, that's my second reason. We are not being told that we have a crisis now, as we have been doing in the past from President Rawlings' time,
right.
Tabuchwe, through he spoke recently, through Osafo Mafo, Honorable Osafo Mafo, and through Banre Edu all the way. And I'm mentioning for you to know that it is not just
and I agree. You've spoken about
imposed,
I mean, in the past there's been talk about the sunset clauses and all of that. We don't even know when some of these will come to an end. But do share with me. So the E-Levy is not the way to go. The IMF would come with its own conditionalities. In the immediate term, if you look at our tax components on petroleum, for example, I want us to briefly look at that.
I'm not saying that tax is not part of the solution.
Right.
Tax will have to be part of the solution. But it has to be a tax, which is not distortionary, a tax which is not punitive.
And that is why...
in effort to use the word, a tax which is not a nuisance.
That is why I want to put this to you. A Deputy Energy Minister, Andre Japamersa, has said that some of the tax components on petroleum can go, about 3 of them. When you look at our tax breakdown on petroleum alone, some 2 cedis per litre on each litre you purchase, which ones would you say should go?
Remember, some of those, first of all, some of those, taxes are what constitutes ESLA. We just spoke about it.
Right.
And they should have gone a long time ago. But the difficulty you are going to have is that unless they were not part of the undertaking that was given again to the same capital markets, right? And we got a price, for ESLA, which the current minister, took. Unless they are not part of what was used to support, the ESLA bond. Let's get it clear. When you talk about ESLA bond, you are using those revenues, to support that bond, which you took, which did not go into paying the bailout costs and the energy sector costs and the rest for the banking sector.
So which ones should go?
The contractors.
Which ones should go?
No, the government should tell us. He should be specific. I'm telling you that the difficulty in making any of them go is that the bulk of them are supporting a loan now, unless you want to default. Because you have a difficulty with.
So it's not. In other words, it's not
statutory
practical to let any of them go. It's not practical.
Well, let them tell us, because I'm giving you the reason why they should tell us. I'm not going to speculate, because they should tell us. I'm saying they have used, look, it's like you using your salary to go and get a loan, right?
Right.
And then you have a crisis at home and you keep promising that, oh, look, I'm going to use part of that salary, to alleviate the problem at home. The problem with government is just like a problem, your wife will ask you, tell me, is it the money? How are you going to pay the loan? Are you going to default, right? By the way, it may be deducted as source. So I'm saying that if the deputy minister says some are going to go, he should tell us. Where is the minister for finance?
Finally, I know you've written on this. This is my very final bit to you, Seth Tekbe. How do we insulate our economy from skyrocketing fuel prices? If you can do that in less than a minute, I'd be grateful. Just go straight for the jugular. How do we insulate our economy from skyrocketing fuel prices in less than a minute? You
build up revenues for subsidy, which we attempted to do, but you take what you call, that is just a short-term firefighting.
Right.
Okay. Then you put in more structural measures. And our approach was to start the strategic stock, which I mentioned. It is not the absolute, but it comes in the mix, and it helps. And it helped us to stop petroleum queues. I'm afraid the way we are going, we may reintroduce petroleum queues. Because if there's no forex to pay the BDCs, who are bringing in, the fuel, the oil marketing companies and the rest, then I'm afraid we are heading back into that situation.
Honorable Seth Tekbe, thank you so much for making the time, waking up so early to have a conversation with me on the AM show. Always refreshing.
I sincerely hope that cabinet will come out with some, credible solutions, for the way forward.
And whatever decisions they arrive at, we'll come back to you and get your take on that. But thank you so much, Seth.
Thank you very much.
That has been a former Minister for Finance and Economic Planning. He's been in the hot seat before, Seth Tekbe. He shared his thoughts. The conversation, of course, continues as the Economic Management Team, Cabinet, meets to Georgia on that matter. Do stay with us. We're not done yet. There's a whole lot more to digest when it comes to the Oliver Mause Bakavomawo issue. And on the last leg of the show, we have a lot more coming your way. Do stay.